Okay, you're on mute, babe.
Sorry, I couldn't find the right link. I apologize.
That's okay. You're here now.
Yay.
Okay. Aha, we're good now, I think. All right. Thank you everyone for joining our panel, for our fabulous panelists, for being willing to do this panel with me. A couple of weeks ago, I was a part of a speechathon that really sparked my interest about doing this panel. I have been in 2 protests and walks and led a chant here in the Denver Tech Center for Black Lives Matter, and found it very important and relatable to talk about this right now. And when Alan Schwartz commented and shared his speech about missed opportunities to talk to our Black friends, I felt very impressed that this was it. This was the panel that I wanted to do, and started a conversation. And the fabulous panelists that will be here today shared so much information that I really felt more and more as we talked, this had to happen. And I'm super excited for this. Honestly, I'm a bit nervous, which I'm not nervous about being a Toastmaster or being in the panel or doing it. I'm only nervous because I know it's a very relatable topic. But I think that everyone is very open to this topic right now, and that's another reason why I wanted to do this panel. Our panel time, it does say from 10:05 to 10:45. We're getting started just a little bit later than that, so that'll push that back a bit. We will have questions that I will be asking the panelists. However, if you feel like you have a question that you don't want to wait to the end, you can either put a thumbs up in the reactions or raise your hand, and Tom or myself will do our best to see that and give you an opportunity to ask the panelists questions. I have a few guidelines for this panel, one of which is no Zoom bombing. We will have a Zoom monitor, Mr. Tom, who is helping us with that, and he will also be our chat monitor. So go ahead and reach out if there's something that you need. Please chat to him directly if you need to ask him something or you have a question for me. If you have a question that just pops up in the everyone, that's fine, we'll catch that too. I super want everyone, and ask, the other guideline is for us all to be respectful. This is a Toastmasters presentation, but even if it wasn't, that's something that's highly important to me, especially with this conversation. It's highly important that we understand that while we may not agree on everything, or we might have differing views, that we are sincere to our panelists and sincere to the other people in the room, and that we are respectful on all accounts. Other than that, I would like to take some time to quickly thank our panelists. Our panelists are Darryl Brown. Thank you so much for coming, Darryl. Ron Pierre, thank you so much. And Jamia Wells Palmer, also known as Mimi the Motivator. And apologies, Mimi, I missed one spot in changing your name. As you said, my mama didn't call me a Mimi Wells Palmer, and I'm sorry about that. Hey, there's got to be something Marcia can evaluate on me. Marcia is my evaluator for today in helping me to complete this Pathways project for presentation mastery. This is my second path, and when I'm done with this, this is level 5. We will be doing reflect my path, and then I will be moving on to finishing that and doing my capstone project. So I'm very excited because this is an opportunity that I, in a few months, will be able to get my first distinguished Toastmasters because of this. So thank you all for helping me be a part of this. Yay. That's very exciting. Susan Horst is going to be my timer for today. Susan, you have your cards ready, your colors ready for me? Yes. All right. Fabulous. Thank you to all the guests who are here. We may or may not have other guests who join in between, and Tom will be monitoring that. I would like to thank at this time everyone that was on the panel discussion that we had in Gmail for sending me fabulous articles as well for me to read. When you're doing a panel like this, you cannot, I feel, just hop on and start saying, all right, everyone, just go. Just start asking your questions. I feel it's very relatable and we really needed to be able to dive into this, and I wanted to do my homework. So I am so thankful to Ron and Darryl and Mimi for their information, and Ron for the papers that he sent me, and even Alan Schwartz sent me his paperwork. And there's some great articles there, and I will ask those people if they care or want those shared in the Facebook group, and if so, we will do our best to provide that at the end. I am going to go forward and introduce our panelists at this time. I need to bring up, hold on one second, the other information for Mimi, because that's also something that I forgot to add to this wonderful thing. We will start with Ron Pierre. Ron Pierre is originally from Canada and was born from a Canadian mother and an American father. He grew up mostly in Canada after his parents went their separate ways. His mom and dad were never married. He is from a military and law enforcement background. He is married with 3 children, and they are a biracial family. His wife is Jewish and was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. His wife met him through fitness competitions in Las Vegas. He is a Black man living in America. He is both Canadian and American. He is an American citizen born in Canada, and he states he is, for the most part, a realist, and his family is multiracial. Thank you so much, Ron Pierre. Next, Darryl Brown is a training specialist with the federal government. He has 20 years of experience in law enforcement, a military vet of 6 years of service, and is often consulted in success coaching, public affairs, leadership, mentoring. He has a master's degree in business administration and is a 15-year member of Toastmasters International, where he served as district director for District 26 during the 2016-2017 term. He is originally from Virginia, but has lived in Colorado since being stationed at the former Lowry AFB, I assume that's Air Force Base, I don't know my military terms, in 1989 to 1991. Thank you so much, Darryl. And now, Miss Jamia Wells Palmer, more commonly known as Mimi the Motivator, is the modern day master teacher, a dynamic speaker, educator, and coach who empowers audiences to create the life and business desired. The host of Get High on Motivation is on a mission to educate, empower, and equip the minority community through her platforms of self-education, holistic health, and universal laws. The vision is to institute a cycle of generational and community wealth in historically, economically challenged families and communities. Thank you, Mimi the Motivator, for attending. On the Facebook, there is the agenda, and on the agenda at the bottom of their introductions is how you can reach them. And I will do my best to mention that again at the end, but that is how you can reach them if you desire to have further conversations with them. They have given me that information. Thank you so much. The purpose of this panel is twofold. Simply, it allows me to fulfill a requirement for Toastmasters to moderate a panel discussion. Second, as a white American, I've come to realize that we have not asked the right questions. We have not allowed voices to be heard, and we have not opened our minds to listen. I want this platform to give Black voices a chance to be heard. I ask that while we all may not agree with something another person said or may have differing views, we all be respectful and courteous to each other. We will not talk over another or shout. We will remain calm and professional. If you are rude, Zoom bomb, or do not follow these guidelines, Tom will remove you from the Zoom panel and you will not be allowed back in. Our helpers again are Susan Horst Timer, Tom, the man in the hat, our Zoom chat monitor, Marcia Wood, a valuist, and panelists and other helpers who help me by giving me questions, feedback, and articles who asked to remain nameless at this time. I'm going to start by letting you all know that I asked the panelists to help me in this panel to give me some questions that they would like me to ask them. I also will go forward with this and pull from those that, though it may have been a question that Ron gave me, Mimi or Darryl, feel free to answer, as well as if I direct it at one of those persons and then you have further comment, please go ahead and unmute yourself and you may further comment or raise your hand. Starting off, Ron, I would like to know your view on what is it like to live as a Black man in America?
Thank you, Trixie, Madam Panel Moderator, fellow panelists, and most welcome guests. What is it like to live as a Black man in America? Well, this question is tenfold. First of all, I'm very proud to be a Black man living in America and understand that Black people here in America have contributed a lot to their country, for this country to be what it is. We have fought for our freedom and this country's freedom, as well as anybody else. On the other hand, I, as a Black man, does not feel that we are appreciated, first as human beings and as citizens. It's almost like this racism has a caste system in this country. Whereas a Black man, I don't feel like my life is worthy or valuable enough to be able to be respected when I know who I am as a Black man, as a human being. And so therefore, when you ask how I feel as a Black man living in America, I don't feel as equally respected, as equally worthy as my other white brothers and sisters.
A follow-up to that I would like to ask you is, you said that you don't feel worthy. Is there anything that us as white Americans could do to help you to feel worthy?
Let me rephrase that. When I say I don't feel worthy, I feel wholly 100% worthy as a person, knowing who I am. I don't feel worthy as a Black American because I don't feel like the system has given me the same value as my white brothers and sisters. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Mimi or Darryl, would you like to answer that as well, or would you like me to go ahead and move on to ask you a different question?
I'd like to add a little bit to that. For us to really understand where we're at as a society in present time in America or the United States, we have to understand the groundwork of what brought us to the racial discord and also other factors that centuries after the founding of this country, we're still arguing the same arguments. We're still battling the same battles, particularly when it comes to matters of race, equal citizenship, equal rights. It seems like it's an ongoing battle in a sense. And I look at America's history in particular. America started off on the wrong foot. There was principles established in the United States, in America, particular principles about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But the question is, because in the beginning, minorities, Africans, those of African descent, gender-based, particularly females, and others were not present in the establishment of the principles that America is supposed to stand for. We started off with the dehumanization of those who were taken from their homeland, particularly after the indentured servanthood, that those who were brought from, who had came from Europe had an agreement, it's particularly the poor, to work a certain period of time, and then they were either given land or given other opportunities that those who were taken from Africa were not. They were dehumanized because they were first kidnapped, trafficked, and subjected to human enslavement. The conditions of that enslavement were so bad that they were treated worse than livestock. There is no way in American history that we have been able to live up to the principles that have been established, knowing the atrocities and the injustices and the moral questions that have established in what I call America's shameful history, that has kept us from being able to move forward past discussions of race, discussions of inequality and injustice, not only for African Americans, but Native Americans, women, and other ethnic groups that may have descended from Europe. America has an awful history that has caused us to continue to be in the position we're in, where there's more prejudice, stereotyping, and many of those groups that have been disenfranchised have been dehumanized for so long that it feels like that this is the normality of how American society is, even though there are some who live under the illusion that we're a great country. But our history begs to differ.
Yes.
And that's the problem with it, particularly when it comes to African Americans, is that our history here begins with being subjected to human enslavement and human trafficking.
Yes, thank you. Let's go ahead and give time for others. I want to give Mimi a chance to answer if she wants to, or I'll move on.
Well, I'll be really quick. I can't speak as a Black man in America.
Sorry, that was the question presented. I should say Black person.
But I will tell you the experience of being a woman observing a Black man in America, or even dating a Black man in America. There is a kind of a stigma that hangs over your head as being a Black man, that you never know what's going to happen when you leave your door. When you get inside of your car, just maybe going to work or going to the store, you take a chance on your life of being pulled over, not doing anything. At least in the neighborhood that I'm from, you could just literally just be going down the street. So what I have observed and witnessed is that my brothers, my Black brothers, they have to be guarded at all times. They have to be guarded at all times, and they have to be on their P's and Q's at all times, doing more than what is required, doing more than what is necessary, so that way they're not a threat, and so that they will be accepted in a place where they should be accepted anyway. So that's the only thing that I would like to add on to that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mimi. Darryl, I'm going to go on to you because you did touch on this, and this is partially one of the questions you asked. And you may have partially answered it in what you had just said. Why is it, you had asked me to ask you, why is it that so many in American society are reluctant to acknowledge or discuss America's history of atrocities associated with the dehumanization and enslavement of Africans, the culture of colonial European supremacy, which you talked a bit about, Jim Crow segregation? Do those centuries of dehumanization specifically toward African Americans have a direct impact of the prejudices, stereotyping, and ignorance that has limited or hindered efforts toward ending racism, supremacist mindsets, and racial discord? So like I said, you somewhat commented on this. Would you like to elaborate on that?
I believe, yes, thank you. I believe that it definitely has a direct impact. And the reason why is because even 50 years since the civil rights movement, the change toward revamping the mindsets have not progressed to the level or degree that it needs to be to show that we have changed from our past. Unfortunately, what has happened during the past several decades is that it's been more or less silenced than actually continual dialogue that American society has to have to break away from those old mindsets. What's interesting that's going on right now is that food products are removing old pictures of what has been long held stereotyping of African Americans and other groups. And there's been an uproar. Why is there an uproar? In changing and pushing for change from what has long been considered viewing particular groups, whether it's African American or otherwise, wrong, because if it was a part of history, shouldn't that be where it should be now as a part of history? Maybe perhaps something in the Smithsonian or something of that nature. We have normalized stereotyping, prejudice, racism, which is founded more in supremacy than racial identity. And my understanding and from my history about racial identity, you're not defined as a racist simply because you acknowledge, as particularly as a Black man, that you are a proud Black man.
Right.
You know, there's some context to that people will have to understand. When you're subjected to supremacy for so long and dehumanization, you are saying that I am not that. I am not inferior. I am a man, because during the civil rights movement, they held signs that said, I am a man. After centuries of Jim Crow, where Black men were often called boy. And even today, in some parts, that still occurs.
Could you elaborate on that? I wasn't able to do a lot of research on Jim Crow, and you've mentioned that a couple of times in your questions. Could you slightly elaborate on that? We need more time for panelists, but I do want you to give a little bit of detail on that for those who don't know.
Well, Jim Crow segregation started shortly after the Civil War and the time of Reconstruction. And during that time, Jim Crow segregation targeted African Americans as a means in which to control their progress, their generational wealth, and subject them to continual poverty. Back during those days, as many know from history, is that there were two types of water fountains, just as an example. One was for white only, one was for Black only. And the atrocities committed during those times of lynching, of domestic terrorism concerning with regards to hate groups such as the Ku Klux Klan and others were designed to, and Jim Crow segregation was the law of the land at that time. It was legal to discriminate. It was legal to separate and impoverish African Americans after the Civil War. And because of that, it really caused detrimental harm to American society in particular. They claimed separate but equal, but the equality part got lost in the sauce during that part of history. And knowing that it was a part of the law of the land until the civil rights movement came about and the establishment of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that was normal in American society. And it has significantly harmed us because the value and the equality of African Americans during that time, because, and we say African American because many of them do not know what country they came from in Africa, so they've been stripped of their identity, and it still continues today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's give time for some other panelists. Thank you so much, Darryl, for that and for enhancing that. That really helps. Mimi, because this is a Toastmaster sponsored event and you did give me a question, I would like to ask you the question that you gave me for your very first one. And that is, what is it like to be a Black Toastmaster? And does being in leadership make a difference? I would really love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you so much for asking me that question and having me a part of this panel. So being a Black person in Toastmasters, the easiest way to say it is that you're kind of like a polka dot. When you come in, you're typically the only one in a club. There are few clubs that have more than one person of color, not just Black people, but people of color. So the club that I particularly joined, what they used to say is our club was kind of like for the good old boys. And it looked like that. If you looked at the pictures throughout the past of our club, that is about, I think we just turned 15 years this past February. So at first it was very lonely. It was very uncomfortable. I was not able or comfortable feeling to talk about the topics that I really needed to practice, because Toastmasters is supposed to be my safe space to practice my leadership and communication skills and to be able to use what I'm doing in real life and apply it there or practice it there. But my mission in life is to eradicate generational poverty in the Black and brown community. And the first time I had to speak on that subject, I was a nervous wreck. Days leading up to it, in the moment, and even afterwards. And if anybody knows me, you know, I'm not a nervous speaker. I get nervous on one-on-one, but not speaking to an audience. But I was so entirely nervous because I didn't know how my message would be received. And it was a challenge. It was a really huge challenge. One, because the majority of the faces that were going to be looking at me, or maybe even all of the faces, even though I may be light complexion, but they were all white people. And I'm talking about a very Black subject, something that they weren't aware of. The first time I spoke about generational poverty, one of the most educated gentlemen in my club said, well, what is that? And I'm thinking, put the two words together, you know, but it allowed me to see that there was a difference in what we had been exposed to and what we actually know as different people in America and even in different regions. Like right now I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and this is where I was raised primarily, here in Tampa, Florida. So the racism experience here versus going to Colorado was very different. In Colorado, it's very covert, which means the white people will smile in my face and be very nice to me publicly, but in private, they will kind of like throw shots at me. Or in evaluations, they would say things like, well, you sound very uneducated. I have a degree in mathematics. I got half of an MBA, and I only quit that because they were paying me I was paying them to teach me what I already knew. But one thing that I think is clear is that I'm not uneducated. I had a lady who approached me after a meeting. First, she blasted me out as general evaluator that she was going to have some words with me after the meeting.
Oh, no.
And then after the meeting, she proceeded to let me know that if I continued to speak the way that I speak, that I would only be able to speak to, and she called herself and said, smaller audiences. And if you really want to speak to more of she couldn't find the words, and she was like, well, larger audiences, then you're going to have to change the way you talk. But she wasn't the first one. I have encountered several older Toastmasters who have probably been in the organization for 10 plus years who have told me the same thing, that the way that I talk is unacceptable, that I shouldn't say y'all, and that, you know, when you leave off the letter off the end of the last words and whatnot, I'm like, well, do you understand that my first language is Ebonics, not the King's English?
Right.
Because Ebonics is a language. It is a dialect. And I have never witnessed any Toastmaster tell some of my Asian brothers and sisters or Hispanic or Arabian brothers and sisters that, well, you need to stop talking like that and saying the English language that way, when that person is doing their best to speak this new language.
Yes, ma'am.
I was not raised to speak the King's language. I was raised speaking Ebonics, and it's what I speak fluently. It's what I speak when the cameras are off and no one's watching and I'm at home.
Right.
But when I get into this public space, I'm having to do what we call code switch in our community. So when I first joined Toastmasters, I would talk like this, so that way no one felt uncomfortable about the way that I really spoke. But it was so uncomfortable for me. And I didn't even know until the first day that I gave my Black speech and I told the audience to pretend that they were all people of color, and that I put my hands on my hips and I started talking like this and said, let me educate you real quick. And a lady approached me after that and said, well, don't you think that you should say, allow me to inform you about some statistics? And I said, no, ma'am, my people don't talk like that. I have to talk to them in a way that they understand. And every speaker knows that we have to keep our audience in mind.
Do you feel, and this may be a touchy subject, but do you feel that there is anything that we can do as Toastmasters to help that? In Toastmasters, we're taught about criticism versus feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this happening, and though my mother is white and she did not grow up in the same situation that you did being a Black woman, but my mother, who joined Toastmasters, her first icebreaker speech was, my first language was Southern drawl. That was her icebreaker speech, right? She grew up in Arkansas and Memphis,
right.
a small bit of Memphis, Tennessee, but mostly Arkansas and Oklahoma. And she said, this is the way I talk. And she's been in Toastmasters a short time and has had things like this, happen to her a little bit. But even now that she's down in New Mexico, she encounters a small bit of that, like what you have experienced, and I have in some senses when I am speaking to other people from the South, because my family is Southern. So I would love to educate us, and while people may not adhere to this, since you have experienced this more, I would love to hear a small snippet back from you on this question. If there's something that we can do as Toastmasters, especially as non-Black Toastmasters, to help and not say those things, what would be your guidelines or what would be your suggestion? Do you have any?
The only thing that I can really say is that I think as America, we have to accept that Ebonics is a language. Like in other countries, you have French and then you have Creole, which Creole sounds to a French person may sound like broken French, but it's not. It's the actual language that is taught and passed down from the different influences of culture. And so I would just like to invite people to understand that people from the South in general speak differently than other people in other parts and regions of the country. But having the Southern drawl plus Ebonics, and if you do your homework on Ebonics, they'll let you know that it's a certain way that we inflect our voice and use words. It is its own language. And I think if we understand that people from different cultures and different regions of the world speak differently, and recognize that that is not a bad thing, it's not a stain, it's not a mark. It actually adds more quality and more experience to every club. So
like
I would just be open to
right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't think differences have to be shunned upon. I think they just add character to every club. And I wanted to also answer your question about leadership. Now, being I was president and area director this past term, it increased, I want to say, the Black membership, especially at my club. And I've even had members of other clubs come to my club because they felt more welcome. At my club, we kind of pride ourselves on being a welcome all. We've had a non-welcome all experience more recently because there have been more, Black topics being discussed. But I want to say that it was definitely scary being in leadership, showing up to different trainings and probably being one or two of the only ones. But it has allowed other people who look like me or sound like me to say that, oh, Toastmasters is okay for me. Toastmasters is a safe space for even Black leaders to come to grow and learn and develop.
Awesome.
Because there are so many Black leaders that need the value that we have here at Toastmasters. It's not just for the good old boys, it's for everyone. And I think it can enhance everyone's ability to even have conversations like this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would like to just take a brief moment and ask, because Darryl and Ron are both Toastmasters, if you have anything to add to that. And while you're doing that, I can take a drink here real quick. If not, I can move on.
Sure, I'd like to echo what Mimi said. I remember, if any of you's been long tenured Toastmasters, you know Rocky Mountain Toastmasters, back in the day had a reputation as a club. And I was one of the first few black men to have ever joined that club. They were the good old boys club, from the Western Slope. And you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I was not welcome, period. And they let you know that. But through my tenacity, I refuse to let people define me or tell me where I should go. So my wife and I, and my mother-in-law actually was the first woman that joined the club. It was an all-boys club. So I remember my first speech, my icebreaker. It was supposed to be 5 to 7 minutes. I spoke of my childhood, growing up in Canada and all that. And oh my God, I was ostracized. Well, some of the members told me there's no way, people could treat a human being like that. We don't believe you, you're making it up. And they were so ignorant as to the fact that they don't understand how I was treated as a human being, being seen very differently, and even in the club. But they told me, well, like Mimi said, well, you have an accent. Why do you have an accent?
Right.
Why do you use this kind of language?
Where it's at, it's labeling, like Darryl or someone.
Why do you, exactly. So right away, they'll let you know that you're not their equal. They'll let you know that you're not wanted.
Do you think conversations like this will help to raise awareness to that and hopefully make a change? Or do you think you feel like we're still talking into the ether and air?
Well, my white brothers and sisters always ask me, well, what can we do to change?
What can we do?
What can we do? And that's the question that's, come back time and time again. And, I tell them, we are all citizens of this common country. We are all brothers and sisters. And for this country to live up to its founding conceit, as declared in the Declaration of Independence, you guys, I told them, my white brothers and sisters have to wage war against racism. We all have to speak up when it happens.
Yes.
And that's what you can do, is to wage war being an anti-racist.
Darryl, you have a comment or would like to elaborate?
Yes,
on
I'd like to add to that. I think what's really key here, especially in this day and age, is that we as fellow Americans have an obligation to educate ourselves, gain an understanding that will enable us to be more empathetic of other people. Sometimes it may bring you to a point where you have to denounce certain things you were taught in your upbringing. Some of your points of view may need to change, but in order for that to happen, we have to be open-minded and open in our hearts to recognize that there are areas maybe in our lives or things that we've been taught or things that we've seen on TV or other forms of media that were absolutely wrong. And we have to evaluate, is my way of thinking part of the problem of why we have not been able to connect as Americans as a true melting pot and live up to the principles we've established in the beginning of this country? We're not there yet. We've never lived up to it because we have a bad history. If we work on asking those questions from someone else's perspective, like Alan Swartz had mentioned, asking someone who has a different perspective, what is it like to live in your world, your society? And also dig deeper into what our history has been toward those particular groups different from us. And it will be an eye-opener, I guarantee it. And it will help us to become better citizens and interact with people much better, gaining that understanding from other people. Ask questions is the key. If you want to educate yourself, ask questions.
Thank you for that. I would like to share that the biggest reason why I want to have this is because of that. And I grew up not in Tennessee or in the South, but like I said, I do have family from that. And because of that, I grew up in an environment in Compton, California, and Torrance and Gardena, where Black lives were integrated with mine. I learned how to double jump at 12, and I lived in Orange County, and I tried to teach my friends, hey, this is what I did this weekend, and these are fun things I learned. And then I was judged for trying to bring that into this community, I was told. And so I learned at a very young age that, well, while you may not have an issue with Black persons or persons of color, or other people in my family were married to, people from Saudi Arabia or things like that, that was my culture. But in Orange County, California, that was not the culture. And what did that teach me? Like, oh, don't say that, don't be that way, don't talk about those things. And when I further went on to college, it was still that way. And it's still hard for me today to ask those questions. And that's why I was slightly nervous about this topic, because I have tried to ask those questions, and I feel like, well, who am I to ask sometimes? Who am I? And are you going to take me seriously, right? As a white person, as a person of non-color. And it sometimes has come across to me, sadly, that people said, well, this really isn't your place. And I said, well, wait, isn't it my place? Like, isn't it someone like me who needs to, like Ron said, and you said, to speak out and to do this? And I think that a lot of us are afraid to make that decision, to ask those questions. We don't know what's going to be said back to us. I'm not afraid of your answer. I want to hear your answer. I'm more afraid of you telling me, stay out, butt out, it's not your fight, because that's what I was told earlier this year. And I finally had to push past that and talk to those people and say the next question, and that is, why are you telling me that? Why don't you think I should be involved? And found out that they felt it was pointless. And part of that is because they feel like, well, we've done movements like this before, or we've said these things before and we weren't heard and we weren't listened, and our white friends tried to help us. But I think that this movement is different. And I don't remember exactly which one of you asked me, and I want to give some time for questions, but I do want to ask this one last question for all three of you if you want to answer. How is this movement different than others, if you feel it is different, or do you feel it's the same? Would any of you like to answer that? Mimi.
I don't feel that this movement is any different than what has happened in the past. I am hoping that this time it will have greater efficacy. But one thing that I can even remember, I want to say Martin Luther King saying, is that you can't fight with fight. You can't fight war with more war, or anger with more war. We need more peace. And I think that is what is going to be required, is that we stop being anti so much and be pro-peace. So not anti-racism, but just pro a collective mindset. And we don't have to even necessarily be a melting pot where we lose our identities as individual people. We can be more like a salad bowl and still have all our colors and all our different type of cultural aspects and contributions to America, because that is the greatest thing about America, is that we have so many cultures, so many different type of people here in one place, which that is the real gold. If we can recognize that and not look at it as it being a problem, like we all need to walk and talk the same way and dress the same way and act a certain way and keep quiet. I really think it is conversations like this, and it is people like you, Trixie, who are taking a stance and saying, look, I might ruffle some feathers, but I'm finna get out here and do this, because this is the work that needs to be done. And it can't be done without you, Trixie. It can't be done without white people. The reason slavery came to an end is because we had white abolitionists. So it does take us all working cohesively with the idea in mind of just simple unity and peace.
I love that. I wrote that down, pro peace, because as a mindfulness person, I truly believe in don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive. So I really like that. Darryl or Ron, do you want to comment on that before I'll go to the floor for questions?
Yeah, I'd like to add a comment. Listening to you speak. First of all, I gave you a lot of praise for doing what you're doing, because it takes a lot of courage, first of all, as a white person, to understand the struggle and to bring forth this discussion, because it is not an easy discussion to be had. And it's so uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Even I myself as a Black man, I'm from a biracial family. My wife is Jewish, and we have biracial children. And we have had to have conversation with our children that we shouldn't have to have. And first of all, we are all colored people, okay? We are all colored people. And this is why I want everybody to realize, because you mentioned this unconscious bias. You mentioned we as non-colored people. Well, there's no such thing as non-colored people. We are all colored people. And we are all human beings. We are all brothers and sisters. At the end of the day, there's only one race, and that's the human race.
Thank you.
And when I talk to people, I feel like I'm, in a place like my back is against the wall. I'm a law enforcement officer, first of all, and being a Black man. And I belong to the Black Police Officers Organization of Colorado. And we've had meetings in the last 6 weeks with the mayor's office, city councils, the public safety. And there are folks in our midst that do not understand why we're raising such fuss about what's going on. They just cannot comprehend that this has got to stop. And when I talk to Black folks, as a law enforcement officer, they tell me, why should you listen to you? You're one of them. And that hurts, because we as Black folks, we have this, because of injustice that has been bestowed upon us, typically Black folks don't trust the police because of what's been done to us from generation onto generations. So they have this stigma where, well, we can't trust the police. So me as a Black man being a police officer, I have to work extra hard to gain Black folks' trust.
Yes.
To make them understand this is the path I chose because I want change, because I want to make a difference. I want to make sure you deserve the justice that you deserve. You get equal justice. And trying to get their mind wrapped around that concept, it's hard. It's really hard because they have no trust whatsoever in the justice system.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you for that. We are a little bit later on time, so hopefully you all can stay past 11 because I'd like to carry this conversation. I want to give Darryl an opportunity to answer that last question and then go to the floor. Darryl, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I'd be delighted. I echo what Ron has said from my experience, not only as a law enforcement professional, cop for 20 years, but also in the military. And I experienced firsthand bigotry, prejudice, people who within my own groups and social groups and things of that nature, that having these types of conversations are very uncomfortable, but they must be discussed. And what I encourage everyone to do is not allow the ostracizing of their social circles to keep them from taking a stand. Don't sit on the fence when it comes to these uncomfortable subjects. Take a stand, ask questions. That is how we're going to make progress. Silence is not progress. Pretending that these issues don't exist is not progress. And a willful lack of education and is not progress here in America. I agree with the marching to bring about police reform, and also for police to do their jobs to the best of their ability to honor the badge. Because Ron and I, not only because we happen to be African Americans in that profession, but we're typically painted with the same brush as those bad cops that may have committed something in Florida, but we're in Colorado and we're looked at the same way. It's not fair or right, but we knew that coming in, that we had unique challenges and other challenges that are familiar for a lot of us serving in this profession. But we have to do better. We can't change the subject, but that's what's been happening.
Right.
Focus on, if the police brutality is the issue, we need to stay on the issue. We need to talk about it until it's resolved. If race is the issue, we need to talk about it until it's resolved. We got to move away from the smoke screens and open ourselves to get an understanding of what ills we're facing in this country. And for us to be able to find a solution and heal this country, we have to educate ourselves, understand perspectives that might not be ours or different from ours, in order for us to come together and help each other and bring about the change that America desperately needs in this nation today.
And maybe one more quick thing,
Yes.
as Darryl said, silence is no longer an option.
Right. That's what I was actually going to say, Ron, because that's why this panel happened. Is I even get choked up about it because I feel that. I mean, when you guys are speaking and you're saying these things, my heart hurts. Like, that's the type of person I am. And I think, but that's a human. That's my brother. That's my sister. You know, would you allow that? Would you allow someone to beat the crap out of your sister? No, you wouldn't allow them to do that. And so it just kept raising up. It was like bubbling up inside of me. And I meditate regularly, and I was meditating, and I came out of meditation one morning and I just said, that's it. Silence is not an option anymore, Trixie. You have to speak up. You have a platform. You have a social media influence. I'm an influencer. I have a social media influence of about 6,000 people on social media. Now, while everyone may not listen on all of those platforms, that's my reach and that's my potential, if not more. And that's why when Tom presented this to me of, do you want to do this live on Facebook? I said, yes, let's do this. I mean, this is a conversation we need to have. And it's scary. It is very scary to have these conversations. I was afraid to go out and protest. I was afraid to carry a sign. I have a sign in my car and it makes me nervous. But you know what? I said to someone the other day, and I've said this for the past few months, that since everything has been happening, that people of color, and I will refrain that going forward, but what I said at the time was people of color can't stop being their color. And when I went out to do my first protest, I had a headache, I wasn't feeling well, and I've had health issues, so I could have stayed home. And I asked a friend to come with me, and she said, well, I don't feel well, I'm not gonna go. And I said, but we need your voices. We need to stand together. And she said, yeah, let somebody else do that. And I said, no, we need to be the ones no matter what, because silence is not an option anymore. And we need to take the stand no matter where that puts us, because we can't stop being who we are just as much as the next person can't. And we are the ones that have to fight for our brothers and sisters. So,
And that's why you are who you are, Trixie. And that's why we as Black folks, we must recognize, people like you, white folks in our midst that understand our struggle, that want to fight with us to end the struggle. Yeah. And I appreciate that. Yeah. With that being said, I'd like the other folks.
That's what I want to do. I would like to open the floor. We have guest here, David, Susie, Mandy, and Meredith, as well as the other helpers. You're open to ask questions as well. Does anyone have something that they would like to ask our panelists? Searching. Thumbs up from Meredith. Awesome. Well, the opportunity is here. And like I said, the panelists, and I will share this in our Facebook group, the information is out there on our Facebook event page where you can reach them. Oftentimes when I'm in conversations like this, I'm either the person who's going, ooh, 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 I have a question, or I'm the person who's like, well, I don't know, should I ask that? And then afterwards, I think, darn, I wish I had their information because I wanted to ask them. So that is available to each of you. If I will post it, but if the panelists want to add their information into the chat, please go ahead and put it into the chat box. Tom, did you have something?
Trixie, we do have a question.
Okay, yes.
Meredith?
Well, hello, everyone.
There you are.
I just want to thank you so much for this panel. There's been, oh my gosh, I'm getting choked up for a second. Sorry, hold on. I've been having conversations with some of my white friends and some upsetting conversations. And it goes into, we begin talking about this, but there are a number of people who, and especially women who have come from very difficult backgrounds. And they go into the conversation about, well, I've made it, so can they.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a conversation about entitlement and ownership and not being a victim. I know this is opening a huge conversation, but I feel like, you know, and part of me, I almost walked out of the room twice when having conversations with actually one of my very best friends, because I had no idea that's where her head was. But I didn't leave because I thought I've got to keep this conversation open, but I did not know how to reframe the conversation. I'm offering you guys a very large question, a very large conversation, and I don't mean to open the door to like another hour conversation, but I would really like to hear from our panelists. How do you recommend I approach the conversation when it goes into that door?
I'll be happy to answer that, and then I'm going to have to leave you guys because I have another event.
That's
But
okay, go
one
ahead.
thing I would definitely recommend is to invite that person to put themselves in the other culture's shoes and give a specific example. You can even give some of the examples that you have heard today. Even if you don't have a local Black person, I'll be happy to be your person. But hey, let's make a phone call. Let's have a three-way. Let's do a Zoom, because maybe that person is just uneducated and unaware of what's really happening and how they're contributing to it. So speak with I statements. As I tell all my clients, speak with I statements and say, I think, I feel, because feelings are objective, and speak how you feel, how their behavior is affecting you, and how it may be affecting America. We have to sometimes just bring awareness, especially to our friends and family, because we're not always aware of our blind spots. And maybe this is one of her blind spots or some of your other friends' blind spots. And as a real friend, it's our responsibility to have those uncomfortable conversations.
Awesome. Thank you.
all.
Thank you so much. And Mimi, I
Thank
know
you.
you're a busy speaker and have to go. Thank you so much for being a part of this. We'll continue on the panel, and Mimi, I will give your information.
I would definitely love to answer that as well with Meredith. I think that coming into these uncomfortable conversations, we need to establish what's the most important thing. Our relationships with people, because I tell you, in this day and age, with political views and so many things that are going on right now with these uncomfortable conversations, it has ruined relationships. And it's sad in our society that we have brought ourselves to a place where we have allowed decades of relationships to be ruined because of a belief system, political views, upbringing, things that we've been taught, and we allow that to interfere with the relationships that we have with other people who have different views. Meredith, the best thing in approaching that is, first and foremost, letting them know that regardless of what we agree or disagree with, that our friendship, our relationship is more important than how we see things in the world. And if you establish keeping the relationship intact first and foremost, over time, as you're having these conversations with them, regardless if you have to agree to disagree, keeping that relationship intact will keep the conversation going, and the possibility, your best chance of being able to open the minds of a lot of your friends and family members who have different points of view. Right now, it's a polarizing society, and people are taking sides, sacrificing and losing long-term relationships, which is to our shame in this society. We've got to change the way we handle things as far as people with different points of view, because it's cutting off and ruining communication between us. We can do better, but start with that, ensuring that the relationship is the most important thing, regardless of what we agree or disagree with. And if you can nail that down first, then you can eventually open the door for the dialogue, including the uncomfortable aspects of these conversations, and be able to move forward with the hope that things will change.
Thank you. Ron, do you have any last comments?
Sure. Most definitely, I echo what Darryl just said. Meredith, you know, being a Black man in interracial marriage, my wife had faced the same dilemma that you just expressed. And it being the person that she is, knowing that everybody deserves equal treatment, equal justice, she has got to take a stand. Whether my wife's relationship with that person, regardless of the authenticity, she had to take a stand, and trying to explain to them, you have to be able to put yourself in that person's shoe and try to understand, because until you do that, we can agree to disagree, but the fact is that person feels this way. You cannot tell them that they cannot feel the way they feel. And so that's the approach that I will tell you. It's a big question. It's a very uncomfortable question. When you have friends that you value your friendship. And if you value your friendship and that person value you as a friend, they must understand that you can agree to disagree, and that you may not see it the way they see it, and try to understand, okay, what is your point of view? Why do you say what you say? And this is what I know. And come to a conclusion. Well, if that person if I'm telling you I'm feeling hurt, that's because I'm feeling hurt. Don't tell me what I feel. So if you say something to you that doesn't seem to be offensive, and I know for me it is offensive, and I'm telling you it's offensive to me, don't tell me otherwise. Respect my feeling. So that's what you got to tell them. And, you know, that way you preserve your friendship. You can always agree to this. My wife is a white Jewish woman. She had all this type of conversation all the time with the friends who don't understand her being married to a Black man and how they think. She can't understand how they think, but she tried to, understand the way they feel and make them understand the way she feels. And they come to a conclusion. Well, you may be my friend. You may, have this belief, and I have this belief, but we can always come to a consensus that the fact of the matter is we are all in this together.
That is a great point to end on. Thank you so much. Thank you, Meredith, for that question. To be conscientious of everyone's time, since we have gone over, I think we could have this conversation for hours, honestly. And I have seen people say, let's do this again, and I'd love to have this again. And I think that that's a great thing to do, and I will explore that to present that opportunity to these panelists and other panelists, and maybe have these conversations again. I recently taught for our educational session about our virtual world, and we are in a virtual world right now. The world is turned upside down, and the only way to really look at it, I feel, is by standing on our head. And part of that, though I joke, 'cause I have a lot of acro friends, the mentality is that really you need to change your way of thinking. That's the point that I'm trying to get across. How you thought before is not how you may be thinking tomorrow or today. While I have opened my mind up to these things, my way of thinking has changed, and my way of thinking is open, and that's why it touches me so much. So it's really empowering, and I would love to explore this further. I am so excited for this panel and for this conversation. I feel like it is very relatable. I just went back to gallery, and it looked like Marcia, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I would like to say, I was looking all around for my stack of working in a team environment. And the last part of that module is conflict resolution. And I know that Toastmasters has some excellent ideas on how to resolve conflict. So I was, Meredith, if you're, you could check out the different paths and pathways that have conflict resolution and study it there. I know that there are some, but I couldn't get my fingers on it just now.
That's okay. That's great.
Done.
That's great. We have a couple more minutes. If you all see, I say it too. If any of the rest of you have any last comments to state, I don't want to start another conversation, but if you had any comments that you wanted to state to your panelists or to the people here, we'll open up the floor real quick. Okay, we're good. Awesome. Wow, you guys. Wow. My arm hair is standing up because I'm tingling with just knowledge and amazement by all the information that you gave me. Ron gave me some amazing papers to look at. I would love to post that. Alan Schwartz did. Darryl, if you have anything that you would like to write, send it to me. I'd be happy to post it on our event here and to share that. I would love to share more and have more of this conversation. Before we go, I would like to adjourn our panel here and thank our guests and thank those again who were helping me. Tom Hobbs, thank you so much for your knowledge with Zoom, for allowing us to utilize your Zoom and have this opportunity to share this conversation. Thank you, Susan Horst, for being our timer. Marcia Wood for being my evaluator for Toastmasters, our three panelists, Darryl Brown, Ron Pierre, and Jamia Wells-Palmer, as well as all our fabulous guests. And as I said, not mentioned by name, but so many people that was a part of the dialogue, some who could not be here today for various reasons, who really helped me to have this conversation and to be able to move forward with this. And I thank you all so much. And I hope you all have a great, great day. And please reach out to me if I can do any more to encourage this conversation moving forward. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a great day. I will give you back your day now. I will stay on if you have any last questions that you want for me, but thank you for everyone else.
Well
Thanks,
done.
Trixie.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Great job. Great job.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Trixie, I have to admit, I've spent many nights thinking about this event, coming to it, and I was really excited about being a part of this panel. I really appreciate you moderating this discussion. These are discussions that we need to have more of on a regular basis, because even though it's a tough subject to discuss, it is a valid, relevant, and much needed conversation. So keep up the good work. I hope you do it again soon.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, Tom, go ahead and shut her down. And thank you again for all your help. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great day, everyone.
All right. We're stopping our live stream. Thanks all on Facebook and around the world for supporting Trixie and this open conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great day.